All right, welcome to another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. So excited to have y'all here joining us for another great episode. Happy Thursday to those of you that are joining us live. Excited to have all of you here. If this is your first time joining a Sales Pipeline Radio, welcome. You're one of now over 250,000 people that have downloaded and listened to and watched Sales Pipeline Radio over the years as we continue to chug along with great guests, great topics. Very excited to have Doug Sechrist. He's the new CMO at Consensus here today. We're going to talk about buyer enablement and what the shift has looked like from sales enablement to buyer enablement and why that's so important. If you're joining us live, we'd love to have you be part of the show. You can make a comment in the comment section, either in YouTube or in LinkedIn. We will see those. We can respond to those comments. We can make you part of the show. If you're watching live or on demand, thank you so much for downloading, subscribing. Every episode of Sales Pipeline Radio always available at salespipelineradio.com. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt.
Excited to have you here. You are a fellow journalism major from back in the day, I noticed. Been in the industry for a long time, Eloqua alumni, amongst other companies. Let's start with the broad strokes, right? I mean, you and I have been around for a while. I'm not saying we're old. I'm just saying that we have experience. What are some of the shifts you've seen in sort of go-to-market from early days of marketing automation to where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely say we're old, Matt. We've been around for a long time.
I'm not saying it for you. I'll say it for myself, but I'm not gonna. Yeah,
I think I'm older than you, but we can figure that out offline. Yeah. It's funny. When I think about my career and where it started, you mentioned journalism. Like, I was a writer, so I didn't really know what marketing was, and I found my way into marketing as a writer. And I'll never forget this, how I got into like growth and demand gen. I was writing RFP responses and proposals. That's what I was good at, and that forced me to get really close to sales teams. And I'll never forget this. I think it was 2000, so that tells you how old I am. My CEO came to me and said, Doug, the phone stopped ringing. Like, you're the marketing guy, figure out how to make it ring. And so having been super close to ssales, I figured it out. I'm like, okay, like what do you guys do, and how do we make this work? So I think when we look at how things have changed, like back then, and what why I tell that story is that question and that conversation prompted me to go to Dreamforce in 2001, where I met Mark Organ and Rich Eld, Eloqua's founder and Serious Decisions founder, and I discovered this crazy thing called marketing automation, which was, I guess that was 25 years ago. And that led me down the path I've been on since, and it was really to evolve the buyer journey. And back then, 90% of the sales process, 95% of the buying journey was sales driven. Yeah. And today it's completely flipped, and we've seen that journey over these couple decades.
We certainly have. I mean, I think about, when I first hung up a shingle for Heinz marketing, there really wasn't sales enablement even, right? Like, it was like, okay, well, someone in product marketing creates some collateral and gives the sales team, and they've got their own stuff. And then the very first piece of research content we did for Heinz marketing was with a sales enablement platform that was fairly new at the time. And in the survey we built, we realized we couldn't even use the term sales enablement because no one knew what that meant. We had to describe, like, here's the functions that we now consider sales enablement. To your point, the most successful companies we see today are talking a lot more about buyer enablement than sales enablement, which you could argue is what we should have been doing all along. But there's definitely some new motions that go along with sort of aligning that enablement more towards the buyer versus directly at the sales organization. Can you unpack what that means and how people should be thinking about that difference?
Yeah. I mean, if you just think, when 90% of the journey happens before a seller's in the room, right? And so it's a AI search. It's a conversation on your website with an agent. It's the first click you take to watch a video, or a product tour. It's all of these interactions where someone is shopping, but they don't want to fill out a form. They don't want an SDR to call them. They don't want a salesperson to call them. They're doing their homework. They're doing their research. They're sharing content with their peers and their boss and all these people so that they can come to an informed, decision, or at least, do enough of the the heavy lifting before they engage with salespeople. And I think, and when we really think about buyer enablement, like that is the journey. So people are doing the work. They're not ready to talk to sales. It actually makes that first engagement with a seller or an SDR that much more important, right? You get one shot, and if someone's evaluating 4 or 5 vendors, if 90% of the journey happens without a seller in the room, that means you get 2% of their time. So if you screw it up, you're dead.
Yeah.
And I think, it's even interesting. I think the pendulum is starting to swing, like back in favor, in my opinion, of sellers and marketers, because in today's day and age, all those interactions are giving us this amazing amount of intelligence. Most companies aren't using it, and so I think the whole notion of buyer enablement is shifting more to, yes, no brainer, like put your buyer in the driver's seat, like give them control because they're doing it anyway. But now we have this opportunity to harness all that amazing intelligence and data to guide the seller, to guide the marketer on what they need next. So that's kind of how I see this buyer enablement sort of evolving to the next generation.
And when I see companies doing this and sort of, letting the buyer have more control of the process, giving them more that they can do on their own, it sort of sheds a new light on what we've done forever on the sales enablement side, which is sort of this, I kind of think of it as the audacity and fantasy of control. Right? That we are in control of the process, that we need you to fill out a form so we can follow up with you, that we need to shoehorn you into a demo, whether you're ready for it or not. Someone told me a week and a half ago, that their company they came to requires a 90-minute demo with at least 3 members of the buying committee, or they won't have a meeting. Theoretically, I get why you say, oh, this is going to help us qualify and help them understand the product, but who's going to sit through that? And who's going to do that work unless you're way down the process? Yep. So, the research is clear on this, right? Like Carrie Cunningham's done a ton of work around the fact that, like, your buyers don't want to hear from you until they're ready to have that product conversation. So they're not going to fill out your form. They're not going to take that early stage meeting. I've been fascinated with this topic this year. We've done some research on our own as well. At one point, we asked people, where do you want to get information about a product or service? And 19% said, I'll take a meeting with a seller. Mm-hmm. And yet 100% of a lot of companies' go-to-market motions are focused on that 19%. Yep. And so you're giving up the opportunity to engage with the rest. And so when you hear, and especially given that you're new at Consensus, I know Consensus has, a platform that addresses a lot of this. When you hear people share those vestiges of control, like when you have that as an objection to enabling self-service demos, to enabling more sort of do-it-yourself, choose your own adventure buying, what's your response to that?
Yeah, it's true. Like we've instrumented the seller with all this crazy technology to automate different parts of the funnel, to keep control. And I think unfortunately, control has left the room. Like the buyer's in control, and so I think the way we have to think about it is, sellers are always going to want control. Marketers are always going to want control. This is how, historically, people have been compensated and how we've built process. But at the end of the day, you've got to build trust. Mm-hmm. So you build trust by giving, providing value. Give the buyer what they want. They're going to get it anyway. Like if you don't give it to them, they're going to find it somewhere, somehow. Yeah. So I think that the notion of control, how you get control back is, you build trust and you give all the value, and in return, you get signals, and again, if buyers are taking what you're putting out there, you can now see that. A year ago, 5 years ago, we couldn't see that, right? And so now we can use that information to have control, but not feel like we're hamstrunging the buyer. We know what you did. We know who you sent this demo to. We know what questions you ask in that AI conversation you had on our website. So now we're way more intelligent. Let us control this by giving you the next thing you need. It's that next best action, that I think we now have this opportunity to give buyers.
Yep, absolutely. Talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Doug Sechrist. He's the new CMO at Consensus, and to really kind of covering this concept of buyer enablement and buyer centric enablement. This was a topic. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to have you on was a topic in our CMO Coffee Talk community a couple of Fridays ago, and it was a great conversation on a number of fronts. One of the things that came up in that is marketing leaders sort of advocate for this change, is not just the technology and process change it represents, but the culture change inside organizations as well. As you have sales and marketing teams that in complex selling situations are kind of required to work closely together, bringing the whole organization along becomes part of the process here. What I've found is that instead of positioning this as losing control, you showcase to sellers what they gain from this. You don't really want to be in meetings with prospects that don't want to buy. You don't really want to do the same demo for the 400th time when you're like, you should have just watched a video on this or walked through it yourself. So it's kind of similar to sort of the AI migration, where people go from being afraid of taking their job to being excited about where it's going to help them focus their job. So what have you seen both in the work you've done, in your role as CMO, as well as things you've seen from consensus customers that are helping accelerate that culture change?
Yeah, it's amazing. It reminds me of kind of the old days of marketing automation and like co-dynamic scoring and nurturing, when we could actually help sales prioritize their time. Like, hey, just focus on the A1s and A2s and all these Ds, whatever, whichever 9 box you use to score. Yeah. Like that was amazing back then. But now, to your point, and where I started this is like the human moment is so critically important, because we only get 2% of the buyer's time for each vendor, right? So you got to crush it. And I think our job as marketers is we're gathering all this intelligence in the async journey, right? And our job is to harvest that and help a seller personalize their experience. Like the days of the harbor, cruise demo, like you mentioned, a 90-minute demo, 3 people have to be there. Like anyone who's doing that, like that's a dying company. That company's going to disappear. Nowadays, most of that harbor cruise demo, a buyer's already going to have seen, and they're going to ask questions. So now, the 30-minute demo that you do, you've got to inject live data. You've got to have it super personalized to exactly the use case and what they want. So now a seller, this is again how they get control back. They show up like wildly smart, better than any of the competitors. And here's the demo, to the committee and the right people. So I think as a marketer, like that's our job. Like, let's figure out like, how do we build the right buying experience so that we collect this data that makes our sellers the best sellers in the world.
I think about friction and efficiency here, right? Like if you're still doing traditional sales enablement, you are paying for people and resources to do things the buyer really wants to do on their own. The buyer will do the work and replace the people it used to have to do that. Your people are going to be more efficient because they're going to be talking to more prospects that are better educated, better motivated, and honestly, a little further down to the commitment to change. And that also increases your deal velocity, right? So I'm sitting here talking about efficiency and cost reduction. I'm talking about better leverage of your sales team's time. So better use of active selling time and greater velocity of deal flow when you've got prospect interested. It sounds like a slam dunk to me. And yet you still have these conversations that are really just about sometimes people's resistance to change and fear of the unknown, even if there's an understanding that the status quo is broken or not working.
Yeah. I think it's 2 things. One, it's we've spent years, decades instrumenting this process, this marketing and sales process that's linear. It's around the MQL to the SQL. People get paid on it. It's how we measure success. It's really hard to change that and rip those systems out. I think that's one. The other one, there's this fear that AI and demo agents and conversational AI is going to replace the SDR. It's going to replace the SE or the AE. And the reality is, it's not. It's only going to replace them if you don't move forward into the future, right? Because if we do our jobs right and we create, a better sales process and a better buying experience, more deals are going to come in, and we're just going to insert people at the right time, as opposed to wasting all this capacity on 90-minute demos and, long discovery calls and 4 to 5 handoffs before we actually put the right person in front of the buyer.
Well, and we're kind of just getting the tip of the iceberg here, because most of our conversation has been related to net new sales. Buyers can be existing customers too. So you think about applying this into your life cycle marketing. Shout out to Omar Akhtar. Literally just earlier today, got a preview of some of his new 2026 go-to-market benchmark data. And one of the greatest growth areas he's seen 25 to 26 in terms of marketing budgets is around life cycle marketing. So not surprising to me at all, given the conversations I'm having of companies that are embracing that full life cycle opportunity. But your buying journeys don't disappear just because someone is already a customer. So the signals, the evidence, the self-service nature of what you're doing here, I could argue that if you could use these tools just in your buyer enablement side, or just in your customer lifecycle marketing side, if you're a big enough organization, and you're going to see the ROI you need.
Yeah, and we definitely see that with our customers. This, I would say, 40 to 50% of the use cases are post-sale. It's adoption, it's engagement, it's getting your team to use what they've purchased, and demonstrating the value. And certainly for us, I mean, this is how we go to market. Like we get in with one group, and then we're driving the expansion motion using our products.
So we got just a couple more minutes left with Doug Sechrist here, CMO at Consensus. Just really grateful for a time for you today. I want to take a slightly different direction on this. You're about 2-3 months into your new role at Consensus. I'm curious, what are some best practices that you have now when you start a new gig? 30, 60, 90 days to balance between understanding the market and the product, as well as assessing the team, assessing the go-to-market motions. Because every day, every week, someone's starting a new role. Sometimes a veteran CMO, sometimes a first-time CMO. What are some lessons and best practices that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, like I started this conversation, before I started, I had a few months to really dig into the market and do my own mystery shopping and and one of the how things I did is exactly that, like secret shop everyone, how does it work? And it helped me understand the buyer. It helped me understand internally, like how we go to market, like way more than talking to the sales team or talking to anyone. So, that was number one. I think the second thing, and I think this is 7 weeks in, you got to listen, you've got to talk to everyone. And, that includes analysts, that includes customers, certainly your internal teams, but, coming in with like a playbook that you've used at a different company just doesn't work anymore. Like every company is so different. So that's been my journey. Like listen, and, start thinking about the future and what we need to do. And there's obviously some like low hanging fruit. Like these are things we're not doing today. Let's do them better. Right. But I think that's number one for me. You got to listen.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate this conversation. Thanks again so much for joining us today on the Sales Pipeline Radio. And thanks everyone for listening live, for joining us on demand. Just appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully this has been a useful conversation for you to take back to your organization. We'll be back next week with more Sales Pipeline Radio. Until then, my name is Matt Heinz. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Take care.